Sean, and I want to throw it to you and everybody listening. Did the 49ers just flat out bite off more than they can chew? I guess that's my umbrella question now, because if you want to tell me, okay, we are a big enough team and a mature enough locker room to handle a presence like Jimmy Garoppolo on the sideline while Trey Lance grows up, okay, I can buy it. If you want to say, yes, with this Super Bowl roster, we feel we can coach Trey up enough to compete even in his first year as a starter, okay, I guess I can buy it. But how many of these things do I have to buy before I just ask the question, did you create 49ers a lane for yourselves that is so fine that to be able to walk it and not fall off and have everybody jump on your back, man, it seems this close to impossible, Sean.
Mark, it's there's so many branches to this conversation, and you are 100% correct. Yes, they did. Of course they did. Rarely, and when we say, well, look what Kansas City did. Well, even they, with Alex Smith, right, ran through 15 games and they played. Even they were a little patient. Now, well, then Mahomes took over in year 2. I get it. But there's a difference here. They're just, well, why is there? Trey was drafted higher. Because you're drafted higher doesn't make you a better player. I look at like Davis Mills here in Houston and Trevor Lawrence. I want you to flip-flop Davis Mills and Trey Lance.
Okay.
Davis Mills and Trey Lance. What do you think the narrative is on Davis Mills, the way he played the last 6 games last year? You know what they're saying? Oh, man, okay, it's time to make a move. Why? Because he's seen a little bit bigger body of work, and the reason why we don't put the same expectations on him, which we should, is he's a starting quarterback, is he was drafted in the 3rd round, not the 1st. Even Lawrence switching with Davis Mills in the same division. So we have these expectations we put on first-round guys that are enormously, they're outrageous because we've had, it seems like a boatload of success, Mark. Herbert, you mentioned. Allen, if you recall, his first 2 years, he was still scrambling around trying to settle in. That's exactly right. So they don't all just happen to happen like Mahomes does, and we've got to stop it. But, yeah, they bit off more than they could chew. Here's why. The best thing that you think of is, well, if you had a backup that is throwing 17 touchdowns and 14 picks and you got to move on from him, we're not very good, we're putting the guy in and we're going to ride with it. This team, all right, when you look at rosters, as we've discussed, as we talked on the handing it over from the guys before us to us, is this roster they've got a stud at about 6 or so positions that are in the top 5 at their position in the league. So you say, what do we need to drive the position to get us to the Super Bowl? It's that position. But the temptation of, and you hit it, Mark, when we were doing the crosstalk, is that with Jimmy Garoppolo, that there was things they felt they hit the ceiling on him as a starter. They just did. Whether they want to admit it or not, they did. And whether you and I think that's the case. With Trey Lance, they feel there's a window to bust through or there's a hole to bust through that ceiling because of his enormous ability. But we've seen him start 3 games, one of them in horrible weather, the other 2 in circumstances where he wasn't the guy. Yes, they bit off more than they could chew to date. We're going to find out. But then you ask, and I'm curious, what's the leash? What's the leash with the Super Bowl team? Is it 4 games? Is it 6 games? Where's your responsibility? Is it to the team? Is it to Trey Lance? Do you want to admit that you made a mistake in year 2 starting him if you're 2-4? All these things that there's a ton of ifs, and I know it's 1 game in, but you're taking a big-time flyer that you hope. I don't like to hope. I usually like to know. I think Buffalo knew. I think Kansas City knew. I still think there's a little bit of hope here. I don't think they're all set 100%. This is the best quarterback by far in our system. I'm not saying I don't. I'm not saying you don't. You don't make this decision. If Trey Lance is a 3rd-round pick, yet you still think he's got the ability, Trey Lance is not the starter in San Francisco this year.
Right. Even late first round. Look at what the Packers have done. Even late.
Kenny Pickett.
It's just different if you've got one of those first 10 numbers next to your name when you come out in the draft. Josh Allen did. Patrick Mahomes did. Justin Herbert did. Trey Lance does. We get it from a year ago. Trevor Lawrence, Zach Wilson. I know Justin Fields just on the outside looking in there. But it's different, and I mean, the one that goes to my mind, especially in you as a Trojan, the one that will always go to my mind when this conversation comes up is Reggie Bush. It will always be, for me, Reggie Bush. Part of it is because I was working there during and with that broadcast during that time, and I watched every play of his career. And if you look at Reggie Bush's NFL career, I know it spanned, 4 different NFL teams. If you look at his NFL career, by almost any metric, it's like, bravo, dude. That was a hell of an NFL career. But no, it wasn't, because at number 2 overall, we were told you were Gale Sayers. And you weren't Gale Sayers. And so this is always going to be a part of football players. It's going to be based on where you're drafted. But again, with this particular team, because so many of the guys drafted top 5 are going to teams that have no pressure, they're rebuilding. If they miss, okay, we'll try again in 4 or 5 years. There's so much on the line here, and there's no time. So you compare this to anything. When you're late somewhere and you hit a traffic jam, you're hosed. I don't know what the answer is for the 49ers if this doesn't hit within the next 3 or 4 weeks.
You're 100% correct, and it's unrealistic. But Mark, you're right. Now let me a good comp is, even though he was drafted a bit later in the first round. Remember when Ben Roethlisberger went to Pittsburgh?
Yep.
We didn't have pressure on him. Ben had a great roster. They said, okay, he can throw it. They moved him in. They weren't going to go away from all, and he just efficiently worked his way through it. And maybe you'll get that with Trey Lance. Now, I know that Trey was drafted higher. I'm just talking about you hit it. Trevor Lawrence, Justin Fields. They go to bad teams because that's why they're picking high, and that's why you get the good player. And every now and then you'll get Joe Montana in the 3rd round and say, okay, he's the best quarterback until Brady waltzes around. So let me ask you, I'm going to ask, because I'm on every week, through the season.
Yep.
But it's still distant here, and I haven't missed a Trey Lance or Jimmy Garoppolo throw, just like you were talking about a Reggie Bush play. So why did, just the buzz around the city, I know when we come on shows, why, number 1, do you think the 49ers made the decision? But number 2 is, why did they want the decision? Mark, any other time, okay, give me somebody other than Jimmy that's a good player but not Brady or Dak Prescott.
Okay.
Dak Prescott.
Go Dak.
If Dak Prescott has 2 NFC championship games and he's on the 49ers roster,
yep,
and took him to a Super Bowl and missed some throws late, he was a 4th rounder. Do you think Dak Prescott is still the starting quarterback?
Yeah, I do.
Okay.
I do.
All right, so here we are. So why the hurry so quickly to get Jimmy out?
Okay, my mind goes to 2 different places at the same time. When you ask me why, the very first word that popped into my head was finances. Okay? Finances. Now, that's only a piece of the puzzle, but it's a team. We keep talking about a Super Bowl roster. And this team knows, as you know, teams are working 3-4 years ahead. What do they know? They know that Nick Bosa needs an extension. They know that Debo's about to scrub the internet. They know that George Kittle just got an extension. Fred Warner, an extension, right? They know these things are coming. And so in order to do all of those things comfortably, where's a spot where we could save money? Their thought is, even if Trey is just Jimmy, well, we could do all of this for a fraction of the price and keep all of these wonderful players around him. So to them, it's like we can have Trey and all of those other 4 players, or we could have Jimmy and we might lose one of those players. So that's answer number 1. But answer number 2 is obviously, I do think that like Kyle Shanahan, being as hard as he is on offensive players, I think saw enough times where he ended up in a big game, whether it's prime time or at the end of the year, where he felt like he was behind at that position versus the team that he was playing athletically.
Yep, Mark, and you're right, because the thing with Jimmy is I wasn't really worried about Jimmy making the spectacular plays that only super freaks in this league make, right? I was, like in the Super Bowl, Jimmy, it's happened. Jimmy's biggest downfall, okay, he may not have the strongest arm, maybe not a great deep ball throw, but he has, like I said, 2 NFC championship games. The guy wins, no matter how we slice it. And when people say, well, he's on a good team, well, isn't that the object? Okay, then I guess we can't give Terry Bradshaw credit or Joe Montana. They were on good teams, okay? Or Troy Aikman, well, you're supposed to enhance him, and Jimmy did his job. Jimmy missed too many easy throws in big moments, Mark. That's why. And even if he makes 80% or 90% of the plays throughout his career, when you go back and evaluate, when you're a coach and you're studying it, you go back and say, okay, here's 10 or 15 plays. Would the other guy have made them? And if you say yes, that's why you make the decision. Now, let's make no mistake about it. And, I've known John Lynch forever. I love those guys.
Yep.
But when you give up those assets to move that far up, you don't have to, you can't wait 4 years. You can, but the world's not going to let you, and neither is the finances, like you said. Like what's going on with Jordan Love in Green Bay.
Yes.
He got no shot to see the field. It's going to be the most wasted, unless they trade him and get an asset. He's going to spend 8 years sitting on the bench in his second contract without starting 3 games because Aaron's there. So, with that, do you think, and you make 2 great points on that, do you think the 49ers players, team, city, organization, while it's 1 game, I'm not putting anybody in the Hall of Fame or Baron. I'm just saying the overall thought going into this. Forget last week. Do you think they went in thinking that their best chance to win and be consistent each week, not spectacular, consistent, was Jimmy or Trey?
This year?
Yep.
The players or the coaches?
The stat, that building.
I think
that building.
I think right now that answer they think is Jimmy. I think that's what they think. And I think that's why they kept him. I think that's why they kept him. Look, Sean, I said this 2 weeks ago when it came down. We love sports documentaries, HBO, Hard Knocks. We got all this great stuff out there now, 30 for 30. If there is any documentary that you could give me 5 years from now, I don't think we're ever going to get it, but I would love The Summer of Jimmy. That's my title. The summer, I want to know. The documentary starts as soon as the shoulder injury happens in Dallas. That shoulder injury, that's the first scene of the movie. Then take me from that to the re-signing in San Francisco, and then the rest of the script is still being written because I want to know if he's going to end up playing football this year or not. Because the reason I want that doc, Sean, is I think all of us, we're all running around in this world with opinions, and I think we know 10% of the story. What must have happened this summer with his shoulder, with conversations with other teams, with his agent. I can envision a shouting match with Parag Marathe at some point. Something. Trey, what they see in practice, arm fatigue. Oh my gosh, he might not be what we think he is. Actually, yes, he is. That whole thing, I think we only know and we're guessing on the tip of the iceberg.
Mark, can you imagine being an organization? I mean, obviously it's a good problem to have with this kind of roster, and you say, well, we just went to the NFC Championship game, and they're an interception, possibly a dropped interception away from playing in the Super Bowl again.
Yep.
They are.
Yep.
And we know they had a couple throws and misses. But with that in mind can you imagine going into this season and thinking, okay, we just got there, we're just going to move on. We got a guy who wins, and you look at his nobody ever benches or replaces a guy who's won as much as Jimmy, who's not 48 or 38 years old, right? You just don't.
Yep.
You don't, unless of course you think, 1, you can't afford him. 2, we gave up too many assets. Or 3, the guy behind him's just better. Alex Smith, Patrick Mahomes. Okay, I get it. But what would have been the problem with making Trey beat him out, and if not, starting Jimmy Garoppolo? Wouldn't it be easier to go have Jimmy and have to bench him if it's not going well than Trey Lance as a young guy and having to bench him and go back to Jimmy? Don't you take more flack? I mean, I know it's both,
yep.
But what was the rush? Why the rush to force a guy in who's only played, and with the COVID stuff the last couple years, still, I think Trey Lance has got an enormous amount of ability. I do. I think Jimmy's enormously consistent winner and an inconsistent on simple throws to get you to a level you say, oh my gosh, Jimmy's never going to be the reason you win a Super Bowl. But you get my point?
Yep.
Where I can look at Josh Allen and say, if they go there, of course it's 11 guys on both sides. But it's never going to be, they're not going to the Super Bowl and winning in Buffalo in spite of Josh Allen. They're just not. So those guys that, look what Brady does, goes to Tampa, boom, instantly in the Super Bowl. Jimmy will never be the reason, but he's never going to be the reason that you're not going to get there in spite of him because he's a solid player.
Yep.
Not spectacular, solid enough to take and Jimmy's always got to be on a great roster. Jimmy ain't taking the Houston Texans to the playoffs this year. Jimmy wasn't taking the Bears to the playoffs. Jimmy can take the 49ers back because he fits with what they do. I'm not saying Trey Lance can't bust through the ceiling. I think he's got a world of potential. the production over the potential. Why were we in such a rush? You said money, but as far as on the field, what would have been the problem waiting? Making him beat him out or let Jimmy play his way out of the job? Or do you think Jimmy played his way out of the job?
I don't think. I mean, my gosh, the last time we saw him, he had one arm and he was in the NFC Championship. And yes, he missed some throws. But you also made the point. Who knows what our conversation is about Jimmy if Jaquiski Tartt holds onto a ball and things go a certain way from there. I'm not blaming Tartt. Who knows where it goes from there? The answer to your question, though, is our world. Our world does not have the patience for the third overall draft pick to not be playing by year 2. It's a rare circumstance that we even let him get through year 1. Mahomes and Lance, that's the end of the story. I guess, and Aaron Rodgers, but that was many years ago. How many big time, and Rodgers was 24th overall. How many top 10 quarterbacks, and you can give me Tyrod Taylor with a shot to the heart and all of the weird stuff that happens that leads to a guy being in. How many top 10 guys after the first year are not the starter? I can't think of any.
None.
None.
Right.
So we would lose it, and I know the answer is, well, a team, you can't listen to the fans and the media, but we're losing it now. What would we be? We would be calling him a bust, and he would have not even been on the field yet.
Right, and the thing about it is when you said nobody in the top 10 the second year that guy's playing, and it goes back to your original point on this segment is this roster NFC Championship game is, those teams because they're on bad teams. This team, you're like, listen, if we take the Super Bowl and last year's NFC Championship game, Mark, the Super Bowl they were in, and say how many plays cost you those games offensively, what I guarantee you won't get to 10 of them. I guarantee it. If Jimmy's 6 of 11 in the Super Bowl, they win. If Jimmy, you know my point? So it's not like a cumulative, like, oh my gosh, the guy sucked. And it's not like Trey Lance is going to make plenty of plays.
Sure.
The question is he a Super Bowl guy? But when you make you're a Super Bowl team, get the NFC Championship game, you're in the prime of your career, and you still get sat down, and they're going with a guy that they think and hope is going to be better, and we all do, but I've never seen anything like it, and you can count less than a dozen plays, I guarantee it, is the reason Super Bowl and last year's NFC Championship game that the 49ers didn't win the first one and weren't playing in the second one.
Sean Salisbury is in for dibs. Get on over to YouTube and Twitch. You can watch the show. Keep on listening where you are. You can call in. Comcast Business text line as well. Those numbers are 888-957-9570. We're going to go to the phone shortly. Also this. Sean, I'm this close. I am this close to changing my mind about something. And this is what it is. When Trey Lance got drafted last year, I thought to myself, okay, we got 5 quarterbacks that everybody's talking about. Lawrence, Wilson, Lance, and then Fields and Mac Jones. And I thought to myself, whichever one ends up in San Francisco, holy smokes, they sold under a lucky star because these other guys are going to have to go hack their way through and hope that the organization puts something around them, gets a good coach, finds an avenue, because it's not just the quarterback. A quarterback does need good things around him. Look at Kurt Warner's career. Good with the Rams, good with the Cardinals, stunk out loud with the Giants. Why? Organizational. So you need to have good things around you, and whoever gets the 49ers, wow, they're going to have a different experience than Zach Wilson is having, right? So That was my thought then. Now, all of a sudden, I am starting to pivot towards sympathy. I am starting to pivot towards sympathy for who ended up with the 49ers because he's going to get 4 games to show himself. And if he doesn't show himself in 4 games, you stink, you're out, you're a bust, get out of here. And I'm like, I don't know. Like, that does not feel realistic and fair.
That's the first time I've ever heard that point of view on that. And you're right. Oh, you're going to the best place. But the best place also puts the most pressure on you because if you don't succeed early, we think it's your fault because, 4 games in, you're supposed to be, an MVP candidate. You are because really, while you're always pressure, you put pressure on yourself. Fields and Lawrence and all those guys living up to where they were drafted and trying to make their teams better. It's called the nature of the sport and the position. But in truth, Justin Fields is not worried about if he's the starting quarterback in 2023. He knows he is. But here, You're right. Will Trey Lance ever get the chance to make mistakes over an extended amount of time, Peyton Manning 28 picks in the first year of his career, and then go on to be a great player. Will he even get a chance to spread his wings? That's something that we're not sure about. And right now it looks a little iffy because I think patience is going to be a problem.